One of the biggest challenges with vocals is clarity, making your vocals sound clear and full while removing muddiness and helping it cut through the mix. After working with thousands of vocals over the years, I've realized that it comes down to getting 5 things right with your mix. And that's what I want to share with you today. I'm going to simplify the 5 most important things about getting vocal clarity in any mix. Let's get started. It might be that your mix needs to address 1, 2, or maybe all 5 of these things, so treat this as a checklist. Whenever you feel like your vocal isn't clear enough in the mix, go through these steps. The first thing I always check for is to make sure there's enough space in the mix, because if there's a synth or guitar or some other track covering up the vocal, then nothing else is going to help except for fixing that problem. So for example, listen to this track.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words and we can't keep lying.
So something is covering up the vocal in this mix, and we can find exactly what it is by just muting one by one until we hear that vocal open up.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words.
So when we mute the synths, instantly we hear the vocal so much clearer. So that tells us that that is what's covering up the vocal. Now to make space in the mix, all we have to do is cut these synths until we hear that vocal poke through enough.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone.
You can see we've got X-Rack Pro on this synth stack. Another thing we could do is pull a little bit of the mids out because we want to keep those synths heavy in the mix, but we just want to cut out some of those mid frequencies where the vocal needs to cut through more. So we can address it with EQ like this.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words and we can't keep lighting. Fire after fire. Just as soon as we put one out, one pops up. But
So we can see by cutting those mids a little bit, we were able to add a little bit more level back into the synths with the max slider, but it wasn't stepping on the vocal as much because we cut these mid frequencies where the vocal was living. So that's one reason why your vocals might not be clear enough in the mix. There's some other element that's covering them up. So in order to fix that, we just need to make space, either turn it down in the mix, maybe apply some EQ to cut out the body frequencies where the vocal needs to sit, and that's going to help that vocal cut through. Now, the second thing I always check for is to make sure the vocal has enough presence. Now I'm going to play through the chorus of this track, and I've got Xbox Pro loaded up on the lead vocals. And just with adjusting one slider, we're going to be able to directly control how much presence we feel in this vocal.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words and we can't keep lying. Fire after fire. Just as soon as we put one out, one pops up. But
So we can tell by just adjusting this mid slider, we're able to control the amount of presence that we feel in this vocal. As we boost the mid slider, adding more of those mids and high mids, we hear that vocal get ultra clear, almost too clear as we get very extreme on the mid slider. But as we pull that mid slider down, we can hear how the vocal gets muffled. It's very hard to hear the articulation of the different syllables and consonants. And so this tells us that the amount of mid-range that we have in the vocals is crucial to how much presence we feel. If we want that vocal to be more clear and more presence, we might need to give it more mids.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words and we can't keep lighting.
So you can tell how much that helps the vocal cut through the mix even more. So that's the second thing to look for. Make sure that the tone of the vocal you're working with has enough presence frequencies. That's the mids and upper mids, and the mid slider in Xbox Pro is incredibly easy to just dial it in a very natural way to bring up the presence. The third thing to look for is to make sure you're using the right amount of compression, because specifically if you're using too little compression, it's going to be hard to get that vocal to sit up front in the mix and to hear all of the details that we perceive as clarity. So take a listen to the verse vocal here.
Give it all away. All I know is that I have to. All I have, will it do for you? Do for you? You take over mine.
So some of the lines are pretty clear, but some of them are falling into the mix too much. And with no compression on this vocal, not only does it sound thin and weak, but it also isn't very clear. So let's bring up the compression, help this vocal sit right up front in the mix.
Give it all away. All I know is that I have to. All I have, will it do for you? Do for you? You take over mine. Give it all away. All I know is that I have to. Give it all away. All I know is that I have to.
So you can hear with the compression on, it brings that vocal to the front of the mix. A lot of vocal clarity comes from bringing up all the low-level details of a vocal with compression. We can hear all the articulations much clearer. Everything sounds up front and close, and that gives us the impression of clarity. So if you feel like you're losing clarity in the vocal, make sure you're applying enough compression. Now, you want to make sure you're using a compressor that doesn't squash the vocal or crush it and make it sound over-compressed. That's why I love these compressors in Xvox Pro. They're just helping that vocal in a very natural way. They sound ultra smooth, and they bring everything to the front of the mix.
Give it all away. All I know is that I have to. All I have, will it do for you?
So you can see with this compressor, we're getting 6 to 12, maybe even a little more than 12 dB of gain reduction. And that's generally where I like to shoot for with this smooth compressor. So that's number 3. Make sure you're using the right amount of compression. The fourth thing to look for is the treatment of the reverbs. Because if you're using really heavy, lush reverbs, you might be washing out your vocal and losing clarity. And that's one of the reasons why the space ducking feature in Xvox Pro is so helpful. This allows you to duck the reverb out of the way of the dry vocal, which helps maintain clarity and articulation while still using big, lush reverbs.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words, and we can't keep lighting fire after fire. Just as soon as
So you can hear with a lot of reverb, we started to lose some clarity in the vocal, but just by applying some ducking to that reverb, we were able to add that articulation back in and still have that big, spacious vocal. But it's not just ducking the reverb, it's also the specific reverb that you're choosing to use. Xvox Pro has 10 different reverbs included. Some of them are really long and lush, like Vibrant or Plate or Infiniverb. Some of them are short and tight, like Room, or Digital is very clear. Chamber is a bit shorter. So make sure if you're working with a very dense mix that you're choosing appropriate reverbs that don't add to the muddiness. So in this case, I might like to use something like Digital, which is a much clearer, cleaner reverb.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words, and we can't keep lighting fire after fire. Just as soon as we put one, that one pops up. But
And one thing I like to do is to mute the space for a moment and just to hear what it's bringing to the vocal. This is just a good way to hear if this is muddying up the vocal clarity or if it's just adding the right amount of space around the vocal.
I just lose control. Every time that you smile, now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words, and we can't keep lighting fire after fire.
So in this case, it's adding the perfect amount of space. It's not muddying up the vocal. We can still hear everything ultra clear, but it does add that nice sense of glue. It places the vocal in the mix more. So that's number 4. Make sure that your reverb isn't muddying up your vocal. And moving on to the 5th thing to check, which is probably the most obvious thing, but it always gets overlooked. And that is to make sure that the vocal is loud enough in the mix. If it's not clear yet and you've checked all the other 4 things, then probably you just need to turn the vocal up. One thing I see people struggle with all the time is trying to find the absolute perfect level of the vocal so that it is exactly even with the rest of the instruments and never sticks out and never falls in. And usually, even if you achieve this perfection of vocal balance, chances are it's not going to sound great to you because that's not how most commercial mixes are mixed. Most of the time, the vocal is up front, it's loud and it's clear. So give yourself a bit of a break. Instead of trying to tuck it into the mix perfectly, help it sit right above the mix, and it's probably going to sound a lot clearer.
I just lose control every time that you smile. Now we can't keep fighting. 'Cause when I'm all alone, I still hear all your words, and we can't keep lighting fire after fire.
Now, I usually check this last because if you don't have the right compression, the right tone, if your reverb is causing a bunch of muddiness, and if there's something else in the mix covering up the vocal, then this is probably not going to be as obvious and it's not going to work as well. But after you've checked all the other 4 things and you know that everything is right about it, it sounds good to you, then just turning it up is going to add that final bit of clarity you're looking for. So to recap, the 5 secrets to vocal clarity in any mix. Number 1, make sure there isn't another element covering up the vocal. If there is, make space, get it out of the way so the vocal can cut through. Number 2, make sure you have enough presence in the vocal tone. You want to make sure that vocal has the right amount of mids, and Xbox Pro makes it incredibly easy to do with the mid slider. Number 3, make sure you're using the right amount of compression. Using too little compression will not bring up that vocal to the front of the mix like you want, so make sure you're using a good vocal compressor to bring that vocal up to the front of the mix. Number 4, make sure your reverb isn't making things muddy. If it is, use ducking in Xbox Pro, choose a better reverb that sounds clearer and cleaner, and that's going to help add that clarity back to the vocal. And the last thing, of course, is to make sure the vocal is loud enough. Just turning up the vocal in the mix is going to make it clearer. If you enjoyed this video, leave us a comment, give it a like, and subscribe for more tutorials like this. And as always, happy mixing.